On Easter, my family gave gifts to everyone except me. My mom said, "Why waste money on you?" I smiled, walked out, and waited for April 6th. The last ribbon hit the floor at 10:47 in the morning, and my name had not been called once. I counted the gifts as they came out of the basket my father carried in like some department store Santa who had curated his list with surgical precision. Gold bracelet for my mother, Diane, the kind with the interlocking links that she had been circling in a Neiman Marcus catalog since November. A Cartier watch for my sister Chloe, rose gold, the face barely larger than a dime, the kind of thing that costs more than most people's monthly rent. A leather watch roll for Grant, Chloe's fiancé of 6 months, a man whose last name I had learned 3 weeks after the engagement announcement. A man who had been inside this family less time than the tulips in the front garden, and who had somehow made my father's list before I did. I waited. The tissue paper settled. Nobody moved. So I asked. I said it quietly because that is the only way I have ever said anything in that house. Quietly, carefully, the way you speak in rooms where the sound of your own voice has been conditioned into something close to apology. Did I miss something? I said. Was there something for me? My mother, Diane Sloan, looked at me the way she has always looked at me when I have asked something she considers beneath her dignity to answer. Like I was a smudge on the white silk rug she had imported from a showroom in Florence. Like the question itself was the offense. "Why would we waste money on you, Avery?" she said. She smiled when she said it. The smile was the worst part, not the words. The smile was the part that told me she had decided, somewhere between the hollandaise and the gift basket, that today was the day she was done performing otherwise. "We only keep you around out of habit, darling." Chloe tilted her head. She does this when she is about to say something she believes is devastating. The head tilt is the warning shot. "You're just not on our level, sis." Her eyes moved to my blazer, a slow, practiced scan that communicated everything the words didn't need to. "You never really have been." My father, Richard Sloan, stared at the floor. He is 61 years old, and he built his identity around a business he nearly destroyed, and a family he holds together through selective attention. He looked at the floor the way men look at floors when they have made a calculation about what silence costs them versus what speech would cost them, and the calculation has come out in favor of silence. He said, "Let's eat before the hollandaise breaks." I stood up. I took my coat off the back of the chair. I put it on. Nobody said anything. I walked out through the front door of the house I had quietly owned for 4 years, got into my car and drove home. No tears, no scene, no screaming from the driveway. Just one thought, sitting behind my sternum like a coal going slowly, steadily warm. They forgot to read the deed. I need to go back 6 years, because none of what happened on April 6th makes sense without understanding what happened before it. 6 years ago, Sloan House Interiors was 11 days from permanent closure. This is not a dramatization. I have the bank notices. I have the vendor termination letters. I have the emails from the commercial landlord giving my father 30 days to vacate the flagship showroom on Colburn Street. The showroom, he had told interior design editors, was the crown jewel of a family legacy going back 2 generations. The reality was that my father had spent 4 years running the business the way certain men run things when they have talent and no discipline, brilliantly, chaotically, and ultimately into the ground. He had taken on vendor debt he couldn't service. He had let the flagship lease fall 90 days behind. He had made a private equity deal for expansion capital that came with a covenant he violated within 6 months, triggering a default that froze the operating account and sent his head bookkeeper, a cautious woman named Irene Park, who had been with the business for 14 years, to his office with a folder of notices and a look on her face that said she had been expecting this conversation and dreading it in equal measure. My father came to me on a Sunday in March, not to ask. My father does not ask. He presents situations in a particular way, flat, matter-of-fact, with an implicit assumption that the people around him will recognize what is needed and supply it. He sat across from me in my apartment and described, without affect, what was happening to the business. He described the lease default, the vendor relationships, the credit situation. He said that the family needed someone to help with the administrative side of things, while he focused on rebuilding the creative direction. Help with the administrative side of things. That is what he called it. He meant, spend your money, put your name on the liability, and do it quietly enough that I don't have to feel embarrassed about it. I was 28 years old. I had spent 5 years working in commercial real estate finance, not for the family, not for Sloan House, but building my own practice at a boutique firm called Meridian Capital Group, doing distressed asset acquisition and turnaround work. I was not wealthy yet, but I was well-resourced in ways my family had never bothered to understand, because my father had never considered my career worth understanding. I said yes, not out of naivety, not out of love exactly, though love was in there somewhere, the complicated kind you carry for people who have spent your whole life underestimating you. I said yes because I understood something about that business that my father had never taken the time to learn. It had real value underneath the chaos, the brand, the client relationships. The flagship location's address, which sits on a block that was about to appreciate significantly because I had read the city's zoning reports and knew what was coming. I spent 11 days working 16-hour stretches to keep Sloan House alive. I used $340,000 of my own money to form a Delaware holding company called Colburn Properties LLC, and I used that entity to purchase the building at 1440 Colburn Street, the flagship showroom, from the commercial landlord who was actively trying to find a buyer because he was tired of the headache. The price was $1.1 million, and I got it at that number because distressed deals are are what I did for a living, and I knew how to negotiate with a seller who wanted out. I personally negotiated with 11 vendors to restructure the outstanding payables, reducing the total debt from $287,000 to $94,000 and spreading repayment over 30 months. I wrote personal guarantee letters on 3 of those agreements, which meant that if Sloan House defaulted, I was personally responsible. My name, my credit, my money. I renegotiated the operating line of credit with Horizon Bank, where I had a relationship through Meridian. The new terms required a guarantor with verifiable assets. I signed as guarantor. I personally guaranteed the inventory financing that funded every major shipment Sloan House received for the next 6 years. The Milan suppliers, the Copenhagen furniture partnerships, the custom upholstery house in Asheville that became responsible for 30% of Chloe's best-selling collections. All of it ran through agreements that bore my signature. My father never asked whose name was on the property. My mother never asked where the money had come from to restructure the vendor debt. Chloe, who came into the business 2 years later as creative director and began posting carefully lit Instagram content about the family empire she was building, never asked who owned the floors she was walking on. I charged them a family rate on the lease, $40,200 a month for a building in a neighborhood where comparable commercial space was going for $11,000. I did not make them whole on the inventory guarantees. I absorbed the risk and let them run. They called what I did helping with the files. My mother said it once at a gala when a family friend asked what I contributed to the business. Avery helps with the administrative side, she said, and turned back to her champagne. My sister once described me to a design journalist as our back office support system, which I saw in print because the journalist emailed me for a follow-up quote, having found my name in the property records while fact-checking. I did not correct any of it. I let them believe the story they had decided to tell for 6 years. On the Monday after Easter, I called Sarah Vance. Sarah Vance is 44 years old and has been a real estate and commercial litigation attorney for 17 years. She went to Columbia Law. She has a particular gift for what she calls structural clarity, the ability to look at a tangled set of agreements and assets and identify, with absolute precision, exactly where the power actually sits. She had been my attorney at Meridian for 4 years. When I set up Colburn Properties, she drafted every document. She knew the full architecture of what I had built and what I had kept invisible. I sat across from her desk on Monday morning and told her what had happened at Easter. Not with emotion. Sarah does not need emotion. She needs facts, and facts were what I had. I told her the words. I told her the order in which they had been delivered. I told her that I had driven home and spent the remainder of Easter Sunday reading through a folder of documents I had kept in a fireproof filing cabinet in my home office, and that I had arrived at a decision. I want to execute the termination provisions, I said. Sarah was quiet for a moment. She has a specific silence she uses when she is not questioning a decision, but rather calculating its trajectory. This will decapitate the business, she said. They told me I wasn't on their level, I said. I'm just helping them find where their level actually is. Sarah allowed herself a very small, very precise smile. She opened the folder on her desk. The termination package was 3 components, executed simultaneously. First, a formal notice of lease termination for 14940 Colburn Street, delivered through Colburn Properties LLC, citing the below-market family rate that had been maintained on a month-to-month extension for the past 18 months after the original term expired, an extension I had extended voluntarily, in writing, and could end with 30 days' notice per the governing agreement. 30 days was what I gave them. Second, a formal withdrawal of the personal inventory guarantee I had maintained with the 3 primary vendors, Cassetti Milano, Haverford Textiles, and the Asheville Upholstery House, Bergen & Craft. The withdrawal letter was sent directly to each vendor simultaneously, informing them that as of 30 days hence, no personal guarantee would underpin the Sloan House account, and that they should evaluate their credit exposure accordingly. This was particularly pointed given that a Milan shipment valued at $218,000 was arriving at the port of Savannah in 48 hours. Third, a trademark enforcement letter, because the one fact my family had never uncovered, the fact that constituted the actual floor beneath the floor, was that my grandmother, Eleanor Sloan, had transferred the Sloan House trademark to me 8 years ago, quietly, through a proper legal assignment, because she had watched her son manage money the way a child manages a kite in a hurricane, and she had decided, without fanfare, to put the thing that mattered most somewhere safe. Eleanor had been gone for 3 years. She had never told my father what she had done. She had told me 2 weeks before she died, sitting in her hospital room with the particular clarity of someone who has decided what the most important conversation is and is not going to waste time on the others. The name is yours, Avery, she had said. I registered it to you because you're the only one who understood what it was actually worth. Sarah filed the trademark enforcement notice with documentation, tracing the chain of title from Eleanor's original registration through the assignment to me, all properly recorded with the USPTO. We did not send a boring letter. We sent a box, white, rigid, tied with a cream ribbon, the aesthetic my mother had built her entire brand identity around. Inside, a single brass key tag engraved with the address of the Colburn Street building, and beneath it, in a cream envelope, the full termination package. The box was delivered by courier on April 6th at 8:30 a.m. I sat at my desk with a stopwatch. At 9:04 a.m., my phone started ringing. Chloe called first. She did not leave a voicemail. She called 6 times in 3 minutes, which I know because I watched my screen light up and go dark and light up again without touching it. Then my mother. 3 calls. Then a voicemail that I will summarize rather than quote directly, because the language she used is not language I want to repeat. Essentially, she had found the contents of the box, and she wanted this fixed, and she wanted it fixed immediately, and she expected a call within the hour. Then my father, Richard Sloan, who had stared at the floor at Easter while his wife told me I wasn't worth the money, left 4 voicemails between 9:07 and 9:22 a.m. The first one, his voice was still performing control. Avery, this letter regarding the lease. Obviously, there's been some kind of confusion with the property management company. Call me. The second, the control was fraying at the edges. The inventory guarantee withdrawal. We have a shipment from Milan arriving at Savannah tomorrow. Do you understand what pulling the guarantee means for that shipment? Call me now. The third, no preamble. You can't do this. I don't know what you think this accomplishes, but you cannot do this. I need you to call Sarah Vance's office and tell them this was a mistake. The fourth, at 9:22 a.m., 12 minutes after the third. The trademark thing. I looked up the USPTO filing. I need you to explain what that means. I can't reach your grandmother's lawyer. I don't know what Avery, please call me, please. That was the first time in 32 years of being his daughter that my father had used that word in my direction, not as a courtesy, as a request from a man who had just looked under the floor of his own house and found someone else's name on the foundation. I did not call back. That evening, all 4 of them appeared at my door. My father came in first, passed me into my foyer with the physical ease of a man who has always moved through spaces as if they belong to him. He is a large man, broad through the shoulders, silver-haired, with the kind of bearing that has always made people assume he is in charge of whatever room he enters. He looked at me the way he looks at business situations that have gone sideways, irritated, calculating, already composing the narrative that relocates the fault. Enough theatrics, he said. We're resolving this like adults. Chloe stood in my doorway with her arms crossed in the specific posture she has used since she was 16 to communicate that she is handling a situation she considers beneath her. We were joking, Avery. Easter morning. You know how family things get. You're so sensitive. You've always made everything so dramatic. Sensitive. The word people reach for when they have been caught being cruel, and they need the cruelty to become the listener's problem. My mother had not entered. She was standing on my porch with the quality of someone who has decided that the location of their feet communicates something important about their position in the negotiation. She looked past me into my apartment with an expression I could not quite read, something between fury and the first, uncomfortable stirrings of recalculation. Grant stood slightly behind Chloe. He looked confused in a way that was not performed.
He kept looking at my father and then back at the foyer, like a man who has arrived at a party and discovered it was the wrong address. The documents are valid, I said to the room. If you have questions about their scope, talk to Sarah Vance. Her office number is in the cover letter. My father's jaw tightened. You would never have had that building without my name behind it. I looked at him. I bought that building with my money, I said. I negotiated your debt with my relationships.
I signed your vendor guarantees with my credit. You have walked on floors I owned for 6 years, Richard, at a rate that didn't cover my property taxes, while telling people you built an empire. I let that sit in the foyer for a moment. I've been the floor beneath your feet for 6 years. Don't be surprised when the floor moves. Grant looked at Chloe. His voice was quiet and careful in the way voices get when someone has just understood that they may have made a significant personal decision based on materially incorrect information. What building? He said. I thought your father owned the flagship. Chloe told me it was a family asset. Nobody answered him. They spent the next 4 days in escalation mode. The first attempt was personal. My mother drove to my office building and sat in the lobby for 2 hours until the building manager, a patient man named Oscar Guerrero who runs the property with the composed efficiency of someone who has seen everything, called me upstairs to let me know. I told Oscar I was not expecting anyone. Oscar conveyed this to my mother with the diplomatic neutrality of a man earning his salary. My mother drove home. The second attempt was legal, or rather, the attempt at legal. Their family attorney, a man named Peter Birch, who had handled Sloan estate matters for 20 years and whose practice was built on trust documents and yacht titles rather than commercial litigation, sent a letter asserting that the Colburn Street building had always been intended as a family asset and that the below-market lease rate constituted evidence of a partnership arrangement that superseded the formal property documents. I read this letter with the respect it deserved, which is to say, I forwarded it to Sarah and went back to my coffee. Sarah's response, which was 12 pages and which I will not summarize in full, addressed each point with the comprehensiveness that 17 years in commercial litigation produces. She attached as exhibits the original wire transfer records showing the funds that purchased the building coming directly from my personal accounts. She attached the loan guarantee agreements with my signature as sole guarantor. She attached the correspondence from Eleanor Sloan's personal estate attorney, a woman named Constance Adler who practiced in Savannah for 31 years, confirming the trademark assignment and the documentation of Eleanor's intent. She sent it certified mail with a return receipt. Then my father did something that crossed a line so clear and so bright that I almost admired the audacity. They forged documents, specifically backdated board meeting minutes, ostensibly from 6 years ago, purporting to show that Colburn Properties LLC had been established as a joint venture between my holding company and a family entity, and that the building purchase had been made on behalf of both parties. The minutes bore the signatures of my father, my mother, and, most significantly, a signature they attributed to me. It was not my signature. It was a reasonable facsimile of my signature, which is not difficult to produce if you have 6 years' worth of signed birthday cards and holiday correspondence to study. But a reasonable facsimile is not a signature, and documents have metadata, and metadata does not lie. Sarah filed for declaratory relief in the Commercial Division of the Superior Court. Judge Patricia Holloway presiding, 23 years on the bench, a former commercial litigator herself who is known in the community for her thoroughness and her profound lack of patience for bad faith tactics. The filing included the original deed records with recording date and grantor-grantee information, the wire transfer documentation, every email chain from the 6 years of the arrangement, and the detail that produced the decisive result, a forensic document analysis of the forged board minutes conducted by Martin Chi, a certified forensic document examiner with 19 years of experience who had consulted on over 200 commercial fraud cases. Martin Chi's report, which was filed as Exhibit F, established 3 things with complete certainty. 1. The board minutes had been created in a word processing application 4 days after Easter, not 6 years ago. 2. The metadata embedded in the document file showed the author name on the creating account as G. Whitmore, Grant's last name as it turned out, which I had finally learned through the engagement announcement Claire's mother had sent me 8 months ago. Grant had apparently offered his personal laptop when the family needed to produce the document in a hurry, the kind of detail that falls through the cracks when you are panicking. 3. The signature attributed to me had been produced by a mechanical tracing process, which the forensic analysis identified through pressure point distribution inconsistencies that I will not pretend to fully understand, but which Martin Chi could explain at length and in court if required. The bank, upon receiving notification from Sarah's office that the property ownership was in active declaratory relief proceedings and that forged documents had been presented in connection with a claim, froze the Sloan House operating account within 48 hours as a standard risk management measure. The Milan shipment sat at the port of Savannah, $218,000 of Italian furniture in a temperature-controlled container, accruing daily storage fees, going precisely nowhere. Grant called me privately on a Wednesday evening. He said, "Is any of this real? The building, the trademark, all of it?" Chloe told me the flagship was her dowry, that it was going to be the anchor asset for the new showroom we were planning in Atlanta. I thought about how to answer that. I said, "Grant, Chloe is the queen of a kingdom made of cardboard. The throne, the crown, the scepter, all of it mine. She's been sitting on it for 6 years and she never once looked at what it was made of." He was quiet for a long moment. 2 days later, the engagement photos disappeared from Instagram. The bio that had read Chloe Sloan and Grant Whitmore, building something beautiful, became just Chloe Sloan, Sloan House Interiors creative director. And then a week later, the creative director part went too, for reasons that became apparent when it emerged that Grant had been named on the forged board minutes and was now, on Sarah's advice, cooperating fully with the court's inquiry in exchange for the deletion of his name from the adverse claims. My father called on a Friday and asked me to come to the showroom. He said he wanted to have a structured conversation about a mutually agreeable exit from the situation. He used the phrase structured exit. He used it 3 times across a 4-minute phone call. He said there were senior staff members who deserved to understand what was happening and that it would be better handled face to face. I thought about this for less than 30 seconds. I said, "I'll be there Monday at 10. I arrived at the showroom at 9:55 a.m. on Monday. The lobby of the Colburn Street flagship is a beautiful space. I will give the family that. Chloe has a genuine talent for the visual, and the showroom reflects it. White oak floors, statement lighting, a curved reception desk in travertine, the kind of first impression that converts browsers into clients and clients into people who spend $40,000 on a dining room. I had walked through this lobby perhaps 100 times in 6 years. This was the first time I had walked through it, knowing it was the last. My father was in the main presentation room. With him, 2 senior staff members I recognized. Marcus Webb, the production director, who had been with Sloan House for 11 years and who gave me a look when I entered that communicated clearly he had not been told the full scope of what was happening. And Joanna Ferris, the operations manager, 8 years, who had the focused, slightly alarmed expression of someone who has been told to be present at a meeting without being told what the meeting is. There was also a woman I did not recognize seated to my father's left, and a court reporter. The court reporter was a man in his 50s with a steno machine, already set up, positioned at the end of the table. I understood immediately. My father had not invited me for a conversation. He had constructed what he intended to be a formal proceeding, a recorded admission session, the kind of ambush-style deposition that certain people attempt when they believe they have a surprise that will collapse the other party's position. The unknown woman was presumably an attorney, there to conduct the examination. He wanted me on record, in a space I owned, admitting something he believed I would admit. My father looked at me from his seat with the expression he uses when he believes he has outmaneuvered someone. I recognized it from every business dinner where he thought he was the smartest person at the table. "Sit down, Avery," he said. "Let's talk about what you've actually done here, under oath." I sat down. I placed my laptop on the table. I looked at the attorney across from me. She was composed, mid-40s, yellow legal pad, the prepared stillness of someone anyone who has conducted this kind of proceeding before. I looked at my father. I said, "Before we discuss anything, I want to establish something for the record." I opened the laptop. I turned it to face the room. I pressed one key. The screen showed a split panel display. On the left, the forged board minutes fully formatted. On the right, the forensic report. Martin Chee's analysis of the document metadata in full, with the author field clearly visible. G. Whitmore. Creation date, April 8th, 4 days after Easter. Below that, in the second panel, the USPTO trademark assignment records, scanned in full, showing Eleanor Sloan's signature and notarization from 8 years ago. Below that, the original purchase wire transfer from my personal account to the title company for 1440 Colburn Street. March 14th, 6 years ago. $100,000. My money, my name, my building. I said, I want to understand who created these board minutes, because the court will be asking the same question very shortly, and it would be better for everyone in this room to have a clear answer before that conversation happens publicly. The attorney's face went the specific white of someone who has been handed a case by a client who omitted material information. Marcus Webb, who had been with Sloan House for 11 years, looked at my father. The look was not one of an employee looking at his employer. It was the look of a man who has just understood something about the past several years of his working life that changes the shape of everything he thought he knew. Joanna Ferris looked at her hands. My father looked at the laptop screen for a long moment. The court reporter's machine was still. My father said, "I'd like to take a short break." "Of course," I said. I closed the laptop. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I walked out through the travertine lobby, past the white oak floors, through the curved glass door with the Sloan House logo etched into it, a logo that bore a trademark that had been mine for 8 years. I stepped out onto Colburn Street. The air was cool. The block was quiet at that hour. A delivery truck was double parked 2 doors down. A woman walked past with a coffee and a canvas tote, not looking at me. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just that, standing. The declaratory relief judgment was issued 6 weeks later by Judge Patricia Holloway. It was 41 pages, and I will not summarize all of it, but the disposition was clear. Colburn Properties LLC was confirmed as the sole owner of record of 1440 Colburn Street. The trademark assignment from Eleanor Sloan was upheld as valid and properly executed. The forged board minutes were stricken from the record and referred to the State Bar for investigation of the attorney who had submitted them. Peter Birch, the family's trust and estates lawyer, who had made the significant mistake of attaching his name to a document that a forensic examiner could dismantle in 11 pages. Horizon Bank, upon resolution of the declaratory proceeding, extended the operating line freeze for an additional 30 days pending account restructuring review.
The Milan shipment was eventually released after Cassetti's own credit team, having received the guarantee withdrawal notice, negotiated directly with Sloan House for a cash-in-advance payment arrangement. My father liquidated a personal brokerage account to fund it. The amount was $218,000. The storage fees at the port had added another $7,400. Sloan House vacated 1440 Colburn Street on the 31st day of the notice period. Marcus Webb left the company the same week. He sent me a brief professional email informing me that he had accepted a position elsewhere, and he thanked me for the years of support I had provided to the business. It was the first acknowledgement anyone in that organization had ever offered of what I had actually done, and it came from the production director who had been there 11 years and had never been told whose name was on the building. Joanna Ferris stayed for another month to help with the transition, then left as well. Chloe's Instagram returned eventually, with a pivot toward content about building something new, a personal brand that was not tied to the family business. The posts were more careful now. The language of legacy was gone. There was no mention of the flagship on Colburn Street, or of the empire, or of what had been built across generations. Just Chloe, in carefully staged rooms, selling the idea of her taste. I did not begrudge her that. Taste was the one thing she had genuinely built herself. Grant did not return. I don't know where he is now, and I don't require knowing. 6 months later, in October, I sat in Constance Adler's office in Savannah. Constance Adler is 71 years old, retired from active practice, but not from the case she considered most important in her final years, the proper execution of Eleanor Sloan's wishes for her estate. She had contacted me 2 months after the judgment to discuss one final matter that Eleanor had asked her to hold until the situation with the trademark had been resolved. The matter was a letter. Eleanor had written it 3 years before she died, and she had asked Constance to hold it until, in Eleanor's words, "Avery has had to use everything I left her, because that will mean the situation has gotten bad enough to require it." My grandmother had known, not the specific details, but the shape of it. She had been watching her son manage the business the way a certain kind of mother watches a certain kind of son, with love and without illusion, and she had spent the last years of her life quietly arranging the architecture of consequence. The letter was 4 paragraphs. I will not share all of it, but the last paragraph said, "You were always the one who understood what the name was worth, Avery. Not what it meant in a room full of people who thought it made them special, what it was actually worth, the work behind it, the care, the patience. I left you the trademark because names belong to the people who mean them. You have always meant it. Build something with your own name on it now. You've earned the room." I sat in Constance's office and read it twice. I did not cry. I have not cried once in the entire arc of this story, which I do not say as a point of pride, but simply as a fact. The emotion I have felt has not been the kind that comes out in tears.
years. It has been the kind that settles into the body and stays, the ballast kind, the kind that makes you stand straighter without knowing why. I folded the letter. I put it in the inside pocket of my jacket, over my sternum. Constance walked me to the door of her office. She was a small woman, silver-haired, with the careful posture of someone who has spent 50 years in rooms where posture mattered. She shook my hand. She said, "Your grandmother was very clear about one thing when we wrote that letter." She said, "Avery doesn't need protection. She needs the tools and the time, and she'll handle the rest herself." I said she was right. Constance said, "I know." I watched. I walked out into the savannah afternoon, the October light doing the particular thing it does in that city. Old gold, low, slanting through the trees in the squares. I stood on the sidewalk and thought about Eleanor sitting across from me in her hospital room 3 years ago, handing me a piece of paper with a USPTO registration number on it and saying, quietly, "The name is yours." She had been the floor beneath me the way I had been the floor beneath them. The difference was she had been proud to do it. In December, I signed the papers for the new space. Not Colburn Street, somewhere better. A building 4 blocks east that I had been watching for 2 years, that had better bones and a corner footprint and light from 3 directions. A property that I purchased in December under a holding company named with my own name, not anyone else's. The firm that will occupy it has my name on the lease and my name on the LLC and my name on the trademark filing, which I completed myself with Sarah's help in October. My grandmother's letter is framed on my desk. Not the family name, not the legacy name, not the name that got passed around Easter morning like a gift that was meant for people on a certain level. My name, just mine, built on a floor that nobody can pull out from under me, because I laid it myself and I kept the deed.